I will never apologize for helping Americans, working Americans, middle class, especially not to the same folks who voted for a $2 trillion tax cut.
President Biden followed through on a campaign promise by announcing his administration's plans to cancel between $10,000 and $20,000 in federal student loan debts for individual borrowers making less than $125,000 per year. The plan would also extend the payment pause throughout the end of the year, cut monthly payments on undergraduate loans in half, and stop unpaid interest from ballooning the balance as long as monthly payments are made based on your income. Look, some on the far left say it doesn't go far enough. On the right, there are claims that this is a handout to theater majors and gender studies degrees. And unsurprisingly, a curious number of Republicans with forgiven PPP loans are whining about so-called fairness.
For our government just to say, okay, well, your debt is completely forgiven. Obviously, they have an agenda for that. They need votes in November. So the timing is a pure coincidence there as well. But it's completely unfair.
Join me now to break down what this plan actually means. Rashad Robinson, president at Color for Change, and Andrea Haley, CEO of Vote.org. All right, so I'm going to start this off. This move has sort of ignited a national conversation about whether or not it's fair. Rashad, I want you to take a listen to what Biden had to say on the issue when he was asked after the announcement on Wednesday.
Mr. President, is this unfair to people who paid their student loans or chose not to take out loans?
Is it fair to people who, in fact, do not own multi-billion-dollar businesses if she wants these guys to get them all a tax breaks? Is that fair? What do you think?
Rashad, this is near and dear to me. I am a professor at Morgan State University. My students are affected by these loans. We live in a country that's just about to send $750 million additional dollars to help Ukraine. So I don't really get these arguments about fairness. But what do you think of what President Biden just said in response to the question of, hey, whether or not it's fair to be handing out these small loans and loan forgiveness?
Well, I think what he said was absolutely right. I mean, what we've seen since 1980 is the ballooning of the cost for college and all of the sort of ways in which aid and loans have not caught up to it. And at the same time, we've seen Republican administration after administration give huge tax breaks to the wealthiest Americans. We've seen corporations be bailed out, whether it's the banks or other businesses. And we've seen everyday people struggling just to be able to keep up in this economy and to be able to gain the type of education that will help our country move forward. We've also seen the ways in which all of this has has widened the wealth gap and has made it much harder for people to be able to have sort of a foothold for a future. And so we recognize that this is a huge step forward. We do not think it's enough, especially given how much has been given to the wealthiest Americans, how much has been forgiven from major corporations for their own misdeeds and their own mistakes. But this is a step forward. We should celebrate it, and then we should double down and fight for more.
Yeah, I mean, look, if our country can bail out a bunch of private banks, I don't see why they can't cancel loans that aren't just from the federal government, from private organizations as well. Andrew, my question for you is, like I said, I use my students as a focus group, and I talked to them in Thursday's class about, hey, what do you guys think of the loan forgiveness? About a third of them were like, I don't know, Dr. Johnson, I don't really think this is enough. Some were like, hey, I'll take your $10,000 if you want to hand it to me. My question for you is, do you think this is actually getting out to the right people? Because there's a lot of misinformation out there. Do you think young people are getting the message, hey, if you're graduating the next couple of years, if you've recently graduated, here's an opportunity for you? Is it going to get to the kinds of people who are going to be voting this fall?
I think so. I think people are getting the message. We've already seen on the site a 76% increase in voter registration in states like Georgia. Georgia notably has one of the highest student debt loads in the country. So I think that young people are connecting the dots between the elections that are coming up and the issues they really care about. Across the country, we're also seeing about an 11% spike overall in youth registrations. So yes, I think they care about issues like student debt, about the Dobbs decision, and I think the message is getting through and people are looking to show up and have their voice heard.
Now, Rashad, I'm never confused or surprised by hypocrisy with the Republican Party, but the whole list that came out of Republicans that got PPP loans forgiven was pretty amazing. The White House yesterday, in a new move on social media that I must praise, had a huge "This You" thread that basically broke down all these different Republicans who were complaining about a $10,000 loan forgiveness when many of them got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Do you think that this is going to be, can this be a winning issue for Republicans? They can attack theater majors all they want, but when they're sitting there having gotten hundreds of thousands of dollars forgiven by the previous administration, do they really have any space to make an attack on this?
Well, they're going to try to find a space wherever they possibly can. That's going to be the goal of the mis and disinformation about this. I do think that as folks' loans are actually forgiven and money is back in people's pockets, or people are not having to pay, there's other aspects of this legislation, of this executive order that I think is important, that, if you are making under a certain amount of money, like if you're making $15 an hour, your payments are going to stop. Your interest is not going to balloon. There are a number of aspects to this. What is going to happen with Pell Grants recipients? All of this is incredibly important. I do think that it's also important that we continue to get out there and spread this message to help people recognize sort of what it actually means when we turn out and vote and put people in office that have to listen to us. This was not just about what we did in November of 2020. This was also about what we continue to do as a movement, to push and press and challenge the administration to actually make this bold decision. But that doesn't happen if you don't have people in office that will listen to us. Everyone should hear and listen to the people who are fighting it. If they get more power, they will work to try to stop this. They will work to try to prevent this type of relief while continuing to give the biggest tax cuts to the wealthiest Americans and continue to let corporations off the hook for how they fleece us. And so this is all of the more reason why we need to continue to turn out, continue to push, and then continue to need the work, to do the work, to be able to help people recognize that we've got to not just look at income when we think about these type of relief. We have to look at wealth, because wealth will also help us to continue to close the wealth gap and to continue to move us forward.
The more debts get paid off, the better America does. Thank you, Rashad Robinson and Andrea Haley, for joining us this morning.